Hello everyone, welcome to Bajirao IAS Academy, the Hindu News Analysis. Today is 26th July 2024, Friday, and today we have some important articles for the discussion. And without any further delay, let's start our discussion. And before discussing all these important articles which were given in different newspapers, let's try to solve a prelims practice question that I have given to you yesterday. And in fact, about this carbon border adjustment mechanism, we have discussed already in our past and previous lectures. And this is a very important topic because the carbon border adjustment mechanism of European Union is going to impact India's exports to European Union. And that is why the government of India has been showing concern towards the carbon border adjustment mechanism, as it will be discriminatory on the part of the developing countries. So the question is, carbon border adjustment mechanism, it is also known as CBAM, is a plan to tax carbon intensive products such as iron, steel, cement, fertilizer, aluminium and electricity generation is proposed by which of the following organizations? So the correct answer for this question is option B, European Union. So this carbon border adjustment mechanism is proposed by European Union. And in fact, when we talk about the carbon border adjustment mechanism, now all the countries have been facing the worst impact of the climate change, and emissions are one reason for the growing levels of climate change. So in order to reduce emissions and in order to achieve their objectives of becoming net zero by 2050 and 2040 respectively, so what these countries have been doing? So these countries in the European Union have brought certain emission standards for their respective industries. So as per those emission standards, industries in European Union have to use less fossil fuels for their production. And secondly, industries in European Union have to bring in technological advancements that will help in achieving energy efficiency, reduces the emissions into the environment. And third, they have to use the renewable energy resources. So all these things are capital intensive. It requires a lot of finances for these industries to meet the emission standards imposed in European Union. So because of the production cost, the production or the cost of production, increase in the cost of production also increases the end product cost as well. So therefore, on the other hand, when we talk about developing countries in the global south, such particularly countries like India, which also exports certain emission intensive products into the European Union market, such as steel, aluminium, fertilizer, cement and electricity. So all these things, so they are energy intensive or emission intensive products, and they will be exported to the European Union. However, in order to provide a level playing field between the European Union industries, where these emission standards were imposed on the European Union industries, so therefore they have to invest in the technology. So since they have to invest in the technology, it costs them more and the production cost will also increase. So products which are produced by European Union industries will cost higher for the consumers in EU. However, on the other hand, the products from India and other developing countries, which usually have a lesser emission standards, so if they exported into the European Union, when you compare the products of both European Union and Indian products, so Indian products would be cheaper in the European Union. However, now the carbon border adjustment mechanism, in order to provide a level playing field between Indian and European Union products, what they are doing, so when Indian goods are exported into the European Union, first the Indian goods, if they proved the carbon intensive or emission intensive, they have to pay a certain amount of tax or tariff, and only then the products will be allowed to enter into the European Union markets. So what has been happening now here, European Union industries and at the same time Indian exports into the European Union will have same level playing field, but now Indian products have to pay the higher taxes because the products are emission intensive, at the same time carbon intensive also. That is the basic concept which is involved in the carbon border adjustment mechanism. And today's prelims practice question is, so this is also very important because it was in news regularly. The question is, Article 142 of the Indian Constitution sometimes is seen in news and it is related to which of the following things? So the options are appellate jurisdiction of the Supreme Court in appeals from high courts. Option B, measures taken by the Supreme Court to do complete justice. Option C, original jurisdiction of the Supreme Court. And option D, conferment on the Supreme Court of the power to issue certain writs. Right? So if you regularly follow news and even if you follow our discussions regularly, you can answer this question. This is also a very, very simple question. It is not that much a difficult question. So try to answer this question in the comment section. And today we have one important mains practice question. So this particular question is with respect to urbanization in India, the pace of urbanization. What are the challenges in existing India's urbanization, and what are the potential opportunities? So how can we further improve or revive the existing urban local bodies that play a very important role in planning and development of urban areas? So therefore the question is, what are the observations from the ongoing trend of urbanization in India? Right, so we need to write a certain observations in the ongoing trend of urbanization in India, and we should also write certain challenges. Right, so these challenges they are going to create for the future, and the directive word is analyze. Now remember, when we talk about urbanization as a term directly mentioned in the syllabus, right? So it is mentioned in paper 1, general studies paper 1, it is mentioned as part of the syllabus. So therefore urbanization is one topic which is very, very important, and it would be better if you have a ready-made content over topics like urbanization. And so if you look at the approach of this question, so how should be the approach of the question, particularly for this particular question, right? So first you need to write some basics, some data about the pace of urbanization. So you can start this answer by writing some data in the introduction itself, right? So the overall objective is to make introduction as attractive as possible. It would be like a hook, and it creates a good impression about your answer in the mind of examiner. So you can start this answer with some data, or you can provide some basics of the urbanization, and so you have to write some observations in the ongoing trend of urbanization in India, because that is the first part of the answer. First you have to write the introduction, and then you have to write observations in the ongoing trend of urbanization in India, and then you have to highlight the potential challenges that to be created in future. So what are the challenges? That is the second part of the answer, and ultimately you need to conclude by giving some way forward to the potential challenges that we have mentioned here. So that is how the approach of the question should be. That is how you need to structure this particular answer. Now structuring is important. Once you structure the answer, once you get to know that how we can structure this particular answer, then you need to focus on the presentation part of the answer. Presentation part of the answer is also very, very important to score good marks. And apart from the presentation part, you should also focus on writing good content in the answer. So you'll get good content by regularly following the lectures, because where we have been discussing the descriptive questions every day. So the introduction is that, when we talk about the urbanization, so when a number of people, so urbanization is an increase in the number of people who are living in towns and cities. So urbanization essentially means that when number of people who are living in towns and cities has been increasing, we can call it as urbanization. So a simple and a very basic definition of urbanization. So urbanization mainly occurs now when how people in urban centers would increase. People generally move from the rural areas to the urban areas. There are certain pull factors and push factors. So both these pull factors and push factors help in increasing the migration from rural areas to urban areas, right? So that is how population in these urban areas actually increases, and it actually results in growth in the size of the urban population, and even the extent of urban areas will also increase over a period of time, essentially because of the migration of people from the rural areas to urban areas. Now we need to understand some trends in urbanization in India, and when we talk about observations in the ongoing trends of urbanization in India, it would be better that if you present some data to prove your points, to substantiate your points, and along with the relevant example. Now India's level of urbanization has actually increased from 17.6% in the year 1951 to 23.7% in 1981, and now it stands at 27.8% in 2000. So these are the trends in India's level of urbanization, increase in the level of urbanization, right? So apart from that, in fact, if you look at the urban areas, in urban areas the per capita incomes are a little bit higher compared to the rural areas. However, consistent with its low per capita income, so India actually ranks among the last 30 in the list of countries which are listed according to the urbanization levels. Now when we talk about, or when we rank countries in terms of urbanization, so India actually ranked at the bottom, right? So that has been indicating that the urbanization is not sustainable in nature, and the pace of urbanization is also not much faster in India. That is being evident from this particular data. And apart from that, when we talk about the total population who lives in these urban areas, it stood at 1210 million people in the year 2011, and according to 2011 census, around 31.1% of India's total population are living in the urban areas, and by 2030 it is expected that around 40% of India's population would live in urban areas. And in fact, over 75% of urban population of the country lives in 10 states only, right? So if you look at the total urban population of 31.1%, the 75% of these 31.1% would live in 10 states. So these 10 states are here: Tamil Nadu, Kerala, West Bengal, Andhra Pradesh, Gujarat, Karnataka, Madhya Pradesh. So these are the 10 states where 75% of the urban population would live. And after that, we need to talk about some challenges, because the second part of the question is asking about the challenges, the potential challenges in a future urbanization. Now, urban centers have been facing excessive population pressure. So there is no doubt that the population in urban areas has been increasing at a rapid pace. So excessive population pressure is one problem that these urban centers have been facing. So in recent times, because of lack of employment opportunities in the rural areas, and in search of better employment opportunities in the urban areas, better living standards, better education, healthcare, and other employment purposes, people have been generally migrating from the rural areas to urban areas. So in recent times, the pace of rural urban migration has accelerated, and that has led to the increase in the pace of urbanization as well. So however, excess population in these urban centers where they cannot accommodate huge population, so that also increases the pressure on the existing urban centers. And even because when population increases in these urban areas, so that would also increases the pressure on urban public utilities. So that is the first problem. And in fact, increasing population has also been impacting the existing planning and development in the urban centers. And another major issue when we talk about Indian urbanization and cities, the major problem is the growth of slums. So about 13.7 million slum households in the country, they are living in slums across different cities. So they are sheltering a population of 65.49 million people across the country. And apart from that, when we talk about the urban areas, inadequate housing is also another problem. And this inadequate housing in the urban areas, now even if there is a housing, it is not very affordable. So rental housing is not very affordable for the construction workers and other migrant laborers from the rural areas to another areas, and that is one factor, so which is contributing to the overflowing of slums in these urban areas, right? So one social problem that has been plaguing these urban areas is inadequate housing, right? So after that, weak regulations by a different umbrella authorities within the these urban centers, or when we talk about the urban governance, there is a weak regulation, right? So state governments which actually retain the effective control over the urban development. Now when we talk about the urban development or local self development, so it comes part of the state list, right? So it is under the control of the respective state government. In fact, the city administration also comes under the part of the state government. However, the state government and the other authorities, the parallel bodies that were created for the urban governance, have actually failed to operationalize the umbrella authorities to regulate transport and other issues in the urban areas. Now, not just a transport traffic congestion that these urban areas have been facing. Urban areas have been facing problems like pollution and inadequate healthcare and educational facilities, and also a poor solid waste management, liquid waste management, and landfill sites are not properly managed, and that has led to the increasing incidences of vector-borne diseases and increasing heat wave like conditions in these urban areas. And there is inadequate housing and rental, cost of renting houses is also very high. Very often it is not affordable. So there are number of challenges that these urban areas have been facing. However, we can say that whatever authorities that the state governments have created, they failed to curb, or they failed to tackle these challenges in the urban areas. And after that, the mass transportation in urban areas is very important. But we can say that as of now, the mass transportation in these urban areas, especially the public transportation, becoming more and more expensive, and most of the citizens cannot afford the mass public transportation, right? So there is also a valid criticism that the existing nature of exclusionary urbanization, so which actually makes metro and bus services more and more expensive for the majority of the population. So therefore the people cannot afford the expensive public transportation. And even there is absence of protection from the disasters, hazards in the field of environmental safety, pollution, ethnic conflicts, violence, discrimination, exploitation. So all these challenges that we regularly see in urban areas, right? So when we talk about the urban areas, in recent times they are becoming more and more vulnerable to number of disasters. For example, we very often hear about floods being struck in one city, or heat wave like condition that lead to the death, and pollution in cities like Delhi and Mumbai, Kolkata, Hyderabad, in all these cities, and water crisis in cities like Chennai. So all these problems that the urban centers have been facing. So it is very important that we need to deal with all these challenges. And financial devolution, another major challenge. So financial devolution should also be taken care of, right? So there is evidence of deterioration in almost all other financial indicators with respect to the urban governance or urban development. So therefore, empowerment of urban local bodies with adequate financial devolution is very important. And in this respect, the state government should regularly constitute a finance commission, as it was mandated by the 73rd Constitutional Amendment Act. So along with the state finance commission, the central finance commission can also recommend certain grants for these urban local bodies, so that they could play effective role in urban local government, and they could also deal with the certain challenges that these urban areas have been facing. And we should not neglect the role of planning and development in these urban areas, that the local bodies can play a crucial role in planning and development of the urban centers. And the pandemic induced problems is also another major issue in these urban centers, because the COVID-19 pandemic has also exacerbated the misery, and even the urban poor and slum population has also substantially increased, especially after the COVID-19 pandemic, because number of people have lost their jobs during the COVID-19 pandemic. However, so when the COVID-19 pandemic has actually came into the limelight, the government, in order to contain the spread of that particular disease, started imposing lockdowns. So a countrywide lockdowns, and these lockdowns have impacted the lower strata of India's population who are living in these urban areas, especially people who are living in these slums. So that has further impacted their overall living standards, and they were not yet recovered from the negative impact of the COVID-19 pandemic and the lockdowns also. So ultimately, in conclusion, you can write some suggestions, or any committee. Okay, for example, ICE Judge Ahluwalia committee. So that particular committee has recommended a few things with respect to the urban development or urban governance. So you can mention the recommendations of any such committee in the conclusion. So that would make your conclusion more appealing, and there is also probability that you would get better marks. So integrated policies, you need to integrate different policies to improve lives of both urban and rural dwellers is the need of the hour. So at the same time, we need to strengthen the linkages between the urban areas and rural areas. This is also very, very important. And at the same time, we need to build the existing economic, social and environmental ties between both urban and rural areas. And that is how you can conclude this answer. So that's how you need to approach this particular answer. Now, the first article that we are going to discuss in this particular session is with respect to the recent Supreme Court's judgment on the state's right to tax mineral rich lands within that particular states. Okay, so actually recently Supreme Court has delivered this landmark judgment that this particular judgment of the Supreme Court has actually upheld the rights of certain state governments. For example, when we talk about mineral rich states in India, Jharkhand is a mineral rich state, Chhattisgarh, Odisha and West Bengal, and there are number of states which can be considered as mineral rich states. So this judgment of the Supreme Court is with respect to the rights of state governments to levy a certain taxes on land that bearing minerals, right? So for example, imagine that a certain portion of the land in the state of Jharkhand has been having minerals. So state government can actually levy taxes for the public welfare on the people who are mining those minerals from that particular land. And in fact, this particular judgment of the Supreme Court has resolved a long-standing jurisdictional conflict between union government and state governments. Okay, so this decision is very, very important because it could have a significant implications with respect to center and state government's jurisdiction over taxing the mineral bearing lands. Okay, so in fact, it is also expected to impact the federal relations between the center and state governments in India. Now, what are the key points of the Supreme Court's judgment? How can we interpret the Supreme Court's judgment? Now, Supreme Court has said that states can actually tax the mineral bearing lands in their jurisdiction, in their state. Now, in fact, the right to tax minerals by the respective state where the minerals are located was recognized by the Supreme Court in this landmark judgment. In fact, this particular judgment will benefit the states which are having these mineral bearing lands. Now, if you look at these mineral bearing lands in India, in states like Chhattisgarh, Odisha, Jharkhand, West Bengal, most of these areas are backward in nature. Now, when state governments has the power to tax the miners for mining those for mining, so then that particular proceeds can be used for the welfare of the people who are living in that particular regions. And in fact, it would also ensure more and more revenue for the state governments. And Supreme Court has also clearly demarcated the difference between royalty and tax. Now, when we talk about royalty, so royalty is actually the money that is being paid for extracting minerals. So money that is being paid for extracting minerals, and it is not same as the tax. So that is what the Supreme Court has said. Royalty is not tax, rather royalty is the money paid for extracting minerals, but on the other hand, tax is collected by a sovereign authority or a government for the public use or for the public welfare. Now, Supreme Court has also made it very, very clear that royalty is like a rent that is being paid for using minerals. Royalty and tax are not same, because earlier state governments have the right to collect royalty from the miners. And in fact, the court has also clarified that there is no law as of now that could prevent states from collecting taxes from the miners, or that could prevent the states from taxing the mineral rights in their respective states. Now, why does this particular decision is very, very important? Now, when you look at these mining areas across different parts of the country, so it could benefit the this particular judgment of the Supreme Court will benefit the mineral rich states in India, because there are number of states, Jharkhand and Chhattisgarh. So all these states have minerals. There is no doubt that all these states have minerals, and they can also earn more money. And this is especially important for the poorer states which have minerals, which have mineral bearing lands, but they are poor in nature, but they would benefit from this particular judgment of the Supreme Court, because now they can collect royalty also from the miners, and along with the royalty they can also levy taxes on the miners. So the money could increase the revenue of the respective state government, and along with the revenue, so it would also significantly increases the welfare of the people who are living in those mineral bearing lands or nearby regions. And apart from that, when we talk about the fairness of this particular judgment, there are different states have different resources and different advantages. For example, in India we have number of coastal states, and coastal states would benefit from the having access to ports, fisheries, coastal shipping. So all these things would benefit the coastal areas. And there are also hilly states, so hilly states would benefit from tourism. So in a similar way, the the states which have these minerals would also benefit by taxing on the miners, right? So this will also ensure fairness, this particular judgment. And apart from that, states have a limited ways to collect taxes, especially in recent times. So what has been happening, the central government has been trying to concentrate the finances also, the financial powers also, especially after the GST was brought in. The financial powers of the center, financial powers are being more and more centralized, or more and more concentrated with the central government. Now the states as of now have a limited ways to collect taxes, and this particular decision will give them another way to generate more and more income for them. Now, what are the major concerns? So with respect to this judgment, we need to understand the concerns also. The concerns included states without minerals might feel disadvantaged. Okay, so there are a number of other states also which do not have the minerals, so they may feel disadvantaged by this. And in fact, central government could actually find other ways to support these states to maintain the fairness. Whatever states which do not have the minerals, so center would find another ways to actually help them generate more and more revenues. But in fact, it is very often in mainstream that most of these mineral bearing states, despite having rich minerals, they are still backward. Infrastructure backwardness, economic backwardness, social backwardness. However, this judgment of the Supreme Court could address that challenge, that these poor states, despite having minerals, would help in achieving the progress. So impact on mining companies. So mining companies are actually worried that they will have to pay more money due to new taxes. Now when state governments imposes new taxes and the cost of producing raw materials or extracting raw materials increases on the part of these companies, so it is also expected that the production cost would also increase. Production cost would also increase over a period of time. So that is also another concern with respect to the judgment of the Supreme Court. And next important article is with respect to geocalculus of the Moscow visit of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and that we need to understand. The context is that recently Prime Minister Narendra Modi, during his third term, his one of the most significant visit was his visit to Moscow, right? So in fact we can say during his third term it was the first bilateral trip to Russia. And in fact, it has drawn a significant attention and criticism also. Particularly, US criticized Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to Russia, and European Union countries have also criticized. And particularly, President of Ukraine also criticized Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to Russia. But this particular visit has been highlighting that on the India's part, it shows a strategic and a diplomatic recalibration in the light of conflict in Ukraine, and at the same time India's positioning in the global geopolitics is actually shown by this particular visit of Prime Minister Narendra Modi to Moscow. Now how? We'll discuss that, right? So assessment of the conflict in Ukraine by the government of India. So when you look at the timing of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to Moscow and the significance of this particular visit, so it has some broad underpinnings in this particular visit. because Prime Minister Narendra Modi visited Moscow after 2 years of this particular Ukraine war began. So therefore it reflects a clear shift on the part of India's assessment of the conflict's progress. And even despite Western sanctions, Russia became more and more resilient. So despite Western sanctions, despite all Western countries extending support to Ukraine, Russia stand resilient. So therefore it indicates India's recognition of Russia's resilience despite Western sanctions on Russia. And apart from that, despite initial setbacks for the Russia, despite in this Russia-Ukraine war, despite there are some initial setbacks for the Russia, but now Moscow appears to be maintaining its territorial gains in the eastern Ukraine, and that has also influenced India's overall stance on the conflict, and this is also part of India's the strategic calculus with respect to Russia. And in fact, India has time and again abstained the UN votes which were criticizing Russia, and India never criticized Russia openly for its war on Ukraine. So in fact, the joint statement language indicates a subtle acceptance of Russia's position on this Russia-Ukraine war. India never criticized openly Russia's a war on Ukraine, Russia's invasion on Ukraine. So that is one thing that indicating that India maintains its close ties with Russia despite Western pressure on India. And therefore, it is part of India's strategic calculation in maintaining the bilateral ties. So despite there are times of distress, during those times of distress, so Russia is being recognized as a strategic partner, and it is also an all-weather partner for India. So however, this visit has been giving a geopolitical signaling, right? So it has been paving way for a geopolitical signaling. Now how it has been paving way for the geopolitical signaling? Recently, Shanghai Cooperation Organization summit meeting was held. However, this particular Shanghai Cooperation Organization summit meeting was attended by External Affairs Minister Dr. Subramaniam Jaishankar, but not Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Heads of all the countries would attend Shanghai Cooperation Organization, but Prime Minister Narendra Modi did not attend it. So despite the absence of Prime Minister Narendra Modi to Shanghai Cooperation Organization, so he went to Russia, right? So he went to Russia and he met Russian President Vladimir Putin. So therefore, it has been signaling India's strategic choice to have a balanced relations with Russia amid tensions with Ukraine. And after that, the Western alignments also. The Western alignments are also very important in this respect. So this particular visit underscores India's concerns over US actions. So what are India's concerns with respect to US actions in with respect to Indo-Pacific as a geostrategic construct? The relevance and the importance of Indo-Pacific has been increasing, but on the other hand, India is reluctant to form any sort of a military alliances, right? So India always wanted that this Indo-Pacific region should be inclusive and it should be free from any military alliances. That is India's actual stand. But on the other hand, US along with other allies of US strongly determined to counter China, and in order to counter China, US is even ready to militarize the Indo-Pacific region. But on the other hand, India strongly opposed to this particular idea. So therefore, US actions in the Indo-Pacific region, especially forming exclusive strategic groups like Australia, UK, US and Quad Plus. So they have been highlighting India's strong desire for a greater autonomy in its foreign policy. So India always wanted to maintain a strategic autonomy in its foreign policy. So that we have already discussed about the strategic autonomy. Now Indo-Pacific strategy. So when we talk about India's engagement with Russia, so it actually serves as a reminder for its options beyond the Western alliances. Now we no doubt that India became too close to West in recent times, especially USA. But that doesn't mean that India would shed its friendly ties with Russia, right? So India's engagement with Russia would serve as a reminder of its options beyond the Western alliances. So that has been emphasizing on the importance of maintaining a multipolar diplomatic approach. So India actually believes in the multipolar world order rather than a bipolar world order or unipolar world order. So India always wanted a multipolar world order. So in the multipolar world order, India's interests are best served. So therefore, this is also one of India's objective. And this particular visit of Prime Minister Narendra Modi to Moscow has also some geo-economic significance. So geo-economic significance, particularly we need to talk about the trade and commerce between India and Russia. So this visit essentially focuses on further strengthening the economic ties between these two countries, particularly with respect to discounted oil is being imported by India from Russia. So after West imposes sanctions on Russia, and West also stopped purchasing oil and natural gas from Russia, so Russia has looked towards China and India. So they are also largest consumers of oil, and now China and India are one of the largest buyers of Russian oil. So therefore, this will further strengthen the economic ties, particularly through discounted oil imports from Russia, and even the potential circumvention of Western sanctions to sustain the growth in trade and commerce between these two countries. And after that, we should not forget the energy cooperation between these two countries, whether it is nuclear energy, whether it is crude oil, or India's investments in Russia's Far East. So all these things are very, very important. So agreements to enhance the energy supplies and even the mutual investments such as Chennai-Vladivostok Maritime Corridor. Okay, so Chennai-Vladivostok Maritime Corridor. So that is aiming to address trade imbalances and boost the economic cooperation as well. So after that, the strategic investments in each other's countries. So that is another significant and focused area. So with significant investments in each other's oil sector, and even a potential new deals, India and Russia are leveraging the geo-economic strategies, right? So these particular geo-economic strategies would reinforce their bilateral relationship amid this particular global uncertainties. So this is the significance of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to Russia. And next important article is with respect to India's illegal coal mining problem. So how India's illegal coal mining is actually a problem, especially in poor belt across India. So context is that on July 13, 3 workers were died because of asphyxiation. So that was inside an illegal coal mine in Gujarat's Surendranagar district. Okay. So because very often illegal coal mining, where workers don't use the safety gear, they properly don't use the safety gear, and in case anything happens, so that would lead to the death of the illegal miners, and these illegal miners are very often poor people, right? So therefore the officials have said that the workers were working in the coal mine near a Bet village in Gujarat, so without having helmets, masks, or any other safety gear. So these things are very, very important. However, we need to talk about the issue of illegal mining in India. So illegal coal mining has led to the increased number of fatalities, and this was not the one incident that took place in Gujarat. There are number of incidents so that emerged in recent times, and that also indicates, so these incidents also indicate that there is illegal coal mining, in fact threatening the people's lives, and it is unsafe. It is also dangerous. So Surendranagar incident is not an isolated case. Rather, last year in 2023 June also 3 people including 10-year-old child were killed in this illegal coal mine. So this particular mine was collapsed when these miners were mining the coal in Jharkhand. So in fact, when we talk about coal is already nationalized in India. It was nationalized in India in 2 phases, and first phase cooking coal, so that was used, cooking coal is actually used for the production of coke in the steel industry, so that was nationalized in the year 1971-72, and then non-cooking coal was nationalized in 1973. The government has also brought a legislation with respect to coal mines, the Coal Mine Nationalization Act of 1973. So it was a central legislation that was passed by the parliament, and it actually determines the eligibility for coal mining in India, right? So who are eligible to mine coal will be determined by the Coal Mines Nationalization Act of 1973. But in fact, when we talk about illegal mining, this illegal mining constitute a law and order problem, and this law and order problem usually rests with the respective state governments. The oversight of the state governments over illegal coal mining is also poor, and that is very often leading to such incidents in coal mines with respect to the illegal coal mining. Now, why illegal coal mining is rampant in India? What are the reasons for the illegal coal mining? So coal is one of the most abundant fossil fuel in India, no doubt. And in fact, the total power which is being produced in India, 55% of the country's energy is also produced. The energy requirements are also met through the coal. So there is a higher demand in India for power. How power is produced? Most of the power is produced through the coal. So however, the legal channels are not able to supply coal on time, or the legal channels are not able to supply adequate coal on time, and that has been giving way to the rampant nature of illegal mining. So very often a local contractors would pay a very low wages for the people who were living in and around these coal mines, and they hire them, and they would make these workers illegally mine coal, and then these contractors will sell coal for a higher rates, particularly because of higher demand for the coal to produce power from the coal. And in fact, many areas that are actually rich in coal are also situated very, very close to homes of populations and who have been struggling with poverty and unemployment. So poverty and unemployment are the two factors which have been compelling people to take up such hazardous, dangerous and harmful work. So that actually contributes to illegal mining in these areas. So there are number of remote areas in Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, Odisha, West Bengal. So mining regulations in these remote areas were very weak. The oversight of the authorities is also very weak. There is inadequate monitoring, and there is also lack of resources, and all these factors have been leading to the weaker enforcement of law, and weaker enforcement of law further giving a fillip to or increasing the illegal mining activities, and the coal mafias have also increasing day by day. And in fact, when we talk about this coal mafia also getting a strong support from the bureaucrats and even the local politicians. And these are other factors which have been making that this illegal coal mining more and more rampant, and there is a less regulatory or authority based oversight and monitoring over the illegal coal mining. And apart from that, so when we talk about the coal mining, so the coal mining is usually, illegal coal mining is usually carried out using certain rudimentary techniques. So these rudimentary techniques are very, very dangerous. So the image that you can see here is known as rat hole mining. So suddenly what happens, the blocks over the top would collapse, and that would lead to the death of the miners who have been mining inside the coal block. So therefore, the surface mining and rat hole mining are very, very dangerous, and they are not scientific methods. They are not scientific methods, and very often lead to the death of the illegal coal miners who are poor people. So in areas where coal seams are closer to the surface, illegal miners actually access them with the limited safety equipment. There is not the safety equipment actually not required whenever the coal is easily accessible from the surface. So minimal operational costs can also turn into significant profits for the coal mafias, so making it illegal coal mining more and more lucrative for the coal mafias. So why do some workers die in illegal coal mines while they were mining? So one thing was, very often these coal miners do not have adequate safety equipment or safety gear, and they also do not follow any protocols, and that is the primary reason for increasing death of illegal coal miners. And apart from that, coal miners also face increased respiratory risks when they go inside these coal mines. So they would increasingly face the respiratory risks. So that also includes inhaling the coal dust. And there is also lack of safety equipment that would significantly increases the overall risk. The miners in Surendranagar incident also died of carbon monoxide poisoning. So in fact, government struggle to cut down illegal coal mining in India. Okay, so how the government has actually struggling to cut down illegal coal mining in India. A mix of economic, social, political and regulatory factors actually makes it difficult for the government to shut down illegal coal mining in India. Right, so it actually shut down illegal coal mining in India, but a number of economic, social and political factors. So the interplay of these different factors and even the regulatory factors makes it difficult for the government very often to shut down the illegal coal mining. However, there is also a very high demand for the coal, because coal is being used for producing power, and there is also higher demand for the power as well. So because of that reason, this illegal mining is also rampant and it is becoming very, very challenging to control. However, the local economies in many areas where the coal bearing areas or coal mines, the local economy has actually dependent on this illegal mining. So once the official operations run their course, the illegal mining takes its place to support the local community also. And apart from that, the legal framework governing mining is very, very complex in India. There is no decentralized structure which looks into the coal mining at the local level. So that can possibly lead to the bureaucratic hurdles and inefficiency in the governance, and less oversight, less regulations, less monitoring of these illegal mining activities, and therefore that would give a further that will further accelerate illegal mining in these areas. Okay, so that's all in this lecture, and thank you so much. So if you like our work, please subscribe our YouTube channel and also hit the like button. Thank you.